The New Orleans Saints have a versatile playmaker on offense who can strike as a rusher, a passer, and a receiver, and his name is not Taysom Hill. We got all that and a little bit of land yap for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, the Saints are very focused on defensive line depth. Also, a shocker as they release JT Gray. We'll take a look at what's coming up next for the Saints at safety and on special teams. And we're going to kick everything off with an exciting new playmaker with a lot of potential being added to the team's practice squad in Tommy Mellott, who could be the next Taysom Hill. All right, we'll pump our brakes a little bit there, but we'll dive into all of it on today's show. We appreciate you very much, as always, making us your first listen and being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if that first $5 bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. You can head over to FanDuel.com to get started. Well, the New Orleans Saints could potentially have another Taysom Hill clone on their roster. Now, obviously, those are lofty expectations to put on a guy like Tommy Mellott, who was a 6th-round draft pick out of Montana State, a quarterback turned wide receiver, landing with the Las Vegas Raiders, but then being moved on from, and then being picked up today, or rather Monday, by the New Orleans Saints to sit on their practice squad. Now, look, here's the thing, all right? Tommy Mellott is a converted quarterback that had over 1,000 rushing yards last season, that ran for 15 rushing touchdowns while throwing 31 passing touchdowns as well. And of course, we know the level of competition here. We're talking Montana State and all that, but also made the transition up to a wide receiver as he came into the NFL. So you've got a guy that could be effectively a triple threat. A guy that can throw the ball, a guy that can run, and a guy that can run from the backfield in particular as a quarterback. And then also that can go out there and catch. He's not the same size as Taysom Hill, who's a much bigger body, a much taller guy. We're talking about somebody right now who is 5'11" and it came in during his pro day at 200 pounds, but also ran a 4.39 40-yard dash. Compare that to Taysom Hill at 4.44. Had a 41-inch vertical leap. Compare that to Taysom Hill at 38.5. A 10'4" broad jump for Mellott. Compare that to Taysom Hill at 10'2". This guy has a lot of athleticism and a lot of really, really incredible stuff on tape in terms of what he did at Montana State. Does that mean that he will be the next Taysom Hill? Absolutely not. In fact, it's wise to consider it a long shot that he will be the next Taysom Hill because there's no one else like Taysom Hill in the NFL. Many teams have tried. Often teams have failed in trying to replicate what the Saints were able to get in Taysom Hill. But I have to say, if ever there was a prospect landing in a place that this could all happen, it is Tommy Mellott landing with either the New Orleans Saints or the Denver Broncos and being with Sean Payton, the guy that devised and created Taysom Hill, if you will. And so I don't want to completely poo-poo the idea, because if the Saints, with Kellen Moore, who builds offenses and game plans based on elevating the superpowers of the players that he has on the roster, doesn't look at Tommy Mellott and think that this guy's got a lot of superpowers to try to build around, I would be absolutely shocked. And how great would it be for the New Orleans Saints, who originated the do-it-all, jack-of-all-trades player in this era of offensive football? Obviously, you can go back to Slash, like Cordell Stewart and stuff like that. Like, there are those other players in NFL history. But in the modern era of the NFL right now, Taysom Hill is one of one. It's why I think he should be a Hall of Famer someday, because I don't think anyone's ever going to do what it is that Taysom Hill has done in a New Orleans Saints uniform. His ability to cover punts, return kicks, return punts, cover kicks, be a quarterback, be a running back, be a rusher out of the backfield, be a wide receiver, and be a tight end. No one, I don't think, is ever going to do that to Taysom Hill's level ever again. And oh, by the way, also carry a 7-2 quarterback record in the process. But Taysom Hill's hurt, and he's not close to being on the field. Kellen Moore has already said as such. He's starting the season on the physically unable to perform list, which means he has to miss at least the first 4 weeks. And at best, only misses the first 4 weeks. I would not be surprised that if we see Taysom Hill at all in 2025, if it doesn't happen until November or December. And so the Saints have a lot of these different players that can have impacts from different areas on the field. Alvin Kamara has been one of those players, and hopefully will finally be in an offensive system again that will allow him to be able to do that. Line him up in the slot, line him up out wide, line him up in the wildcat, do a bunch of stuff with him. I love all those game plans for Alvin Kamara. You can do the same thing or things similar with Velus Jones Jr., who has running back and wide receiver in his blood. Like, this is exactly what it is that he does. He's a Ty Montgomery type. And so you can utilize him. And with that 4.31 breakaway speed, he can have a lot of impact for you. Rashid Shaheed can be moved around. Juwan Johnson can be moved around. Jack Stoll can be moved around. There's a lot of positionlessness going on this offense, despite there being a lot of position forward approach too. Don't get me wrong. But if New Orleans is looking for another player that could potentially develop into a player that they could utilize in a bunch of different spots, should they need to, Tommy Mellott's really, really interesting. And here's the other thing too. You lose a wide receiver, you can plug him in. You lose enough quarterbacks, you can plug him in. You lose another rushing option, you can plug him in. There's a lot of different things that you can do with a player like that by only holding down one roster spot and allowing him to be able to go out and do that. So just imagine the, what I would call, very funny nature of the Saints bringing in and originating the modern era of the slash player in Taysom Hill. Several other teams trying to replicate it. The Ravens tried, the Browns tried, the Panthers tried, the Chargers tried, the Bucks tried. So many different teams out there have tried it, and they all failed. None of them have replicated or even gotten close to finding something fieldable when it comes to emulating the Taysom Hill game plan. How funny would it be if the next team to get the guy that can do a percentage of what it is that Taysom Hill does in a fieldable manner is, again, the New Orleans Saints? Everyone would deserve an opportunity there to laugh in the face of the rest of the league that tried to do it, if that was the case. Now, again, do I think that Tommy Mellott is going to be the next Taysom Hill? I don't. Do I think, though, that they have a chance to get some versatility out of a player like Tommy Mellott, who has some incredible, naturally gifted talents? Absolutely, yes. And so we'll see what happens. He may never make it off the practice squad. He may never see the NFL field. But if things go well and they get a multiple player to come in and help out at some point during this September, during this October, that's a huge win for New Orleans, and one that they would deserve to celebrate, because not only would they have then been the one team that created the modern day Taysom Hill, they would then become the first team to successfully, even just to a small degree, emulate the modern day Taysom Hill as well. Could be very interesting. We'll see what happens with the 5'11", 200-pound speedster and triple threat in Tommy Mellott. Coming up next, the New Orleans Saints shocked everybody by releasing JT Gray. Why I think they did it and who takes his place. Let's get to that next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. The NFL season is literally days away, and now it's time to get your fantasy football team started. If you haven't already, that's what we're going to be doing. We're getting started over with Yahoo Fantasy, me and the rest of the Locked On executive team, and you should be too, whether you're a first-timer or you're a veteran that's making your millionth league. With season kickoff literal days away, now is the time to start playing Yahoo Fantasy, which offers a ton of fun ways to play fantasy football. You want more ways to play? Well, you can check out Yahoo's new Fantasy Football Guillotine League, where the lowest scoring team is eliminated each week until one team is left standing. Maybe you want to play with friends instantly. Try the new Draft with Friends mode. Prefer the classics? Well, get your crew together and get started in a private league head-to-head, or no crew, no problem. You can join a public league, the easiest way to play. NFL season kickoff is this Thursday, September 4th, so don't wait. Get started with your league now. You can draft now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, family. The New Orleans Saints shocked all of us with the release of J.T. Gray, a surprising move that clearly only happened because the New Orleans Saints truly felt like it was time to move on. This was a big surprise for me. So I want to take a look at why I think that the Saints made the move and where they go from here. I think the reason why the Saints made this move, which by the way is a big move, is because of the fact that they feel that they probably don't have the roster real estate to have players that serve a singular role. I'm not going to sit here and diminish what JT Gray did. JT Gray is one of the best special teams players I have ever watched play football. Him as a gunner, in kick coverage, wherever it is that he was, he has always been able to have a major impact. And I am not interested in diminishing that whatsoever. This is a guy that was a two-time second-team All-Pro, and was a first-team All-Pro back in 2021. Should have been first-team All-Pro last year as well because he was absolutely outstanding. I believe he led the league in special teams tackles in 2024, so I think he got robbed a little bit. Certainly Darren Rizzi, who's now with the Denver Broncos, by the way, so I would not be surprised to see JT Gray head over to Denver very quickly because his time here in New Orleans is over. It's not, hey, they might bring him back to the practice squad. We asked Kellen Moore if they made a practice squad offer to him. He said that they did not go that route with him, and they expect that he's going to see a lot of offers and a lot of interest very quickly. That's why I think that the Denver Broncos are likely to jump on there. The Saints have also already released a thank you post, like the New Orleans Saints thanked JT Gray before Anthony Davis thanked New Orleans type stuff. And so I think that the time for JT Gray here in New Orleans is officially done. And let me tell you, when I say it was surprising, I mean it was surprising. Like I had just seen the dude earlier in the day. And so very, very shocking to see that this happened. So what are the New Orleans Saints thinking? Why make this move? Like I said, I think that they make this move because they don't believe, this is my assumption, right? I actually have three different things that I'll highlight here, but this is the thing that I think is the most important. I don't think that the Saints feel that they have the roster real estate to designate to somebody that serves one role. I think that that's just simply where the Saints are right now. This is a part of the rebuild. This is a part of the refresh on the roster. If you wanted this to happen in terms of a rebuild or a refresh, sometimes this is what it looks like. It's not a money move. Saints only saved $1.9 million, and that's this season. What good is that going to do them? And then, but I think that very much this has to do with the fact that he wasn't a guy that they put outside of emergency situations on the defensive side of the football. He was always going to be a core special teamer. He was a four-time special teams captain, had the ability to get his fifth year this year as a special teams captain, would have had an old gold badge for that. And I think that New Orleans just simply feels that they just can't do that, that they need players to be able to contribute both on the side of the football that they play and on special teams. And so I know this had to be a really tough one. Phil Galliano, the Saints special teams coordinator, visited with us last week and was absolutely praising everything about JT Gray. And to the point where he was like, we know what JT Gray can do. We're not worried about that, right? And now he doesn't have JT Gray anymore. And so what are the Saints going to do next? Well, let's start with gunner, because that's where the void is left for JT Gray. But remember, it's not just one gunner that they lost. It's a second guy, too, in Rico Payton. Rico Payton, now a member of the New York Giants, was the Saints' core gunner opposite JT Gray throughout the season last year. I think the Saints have multiple options, but three very specific options that I want to highlight at gunner. The first of which is a guy in Isaac Yiadom, who doesn't really fit because of the fact that he's one of the starting two outside cornerbacks. But if he and Quincy Riley ever jostle for position, he becomes a very, very good gunner for you and a good option for you at that position. That's what he did back in 2023 before, and really even during the time that he stepped into some of those lead roles with Paulson Adebo and Marshawn Lattimore, former corners for the New Orleans Saints, dealing with injuries during that season. The other players, though, that I would highlight that are more likely to immediately step into those roles, Isaiah Stallbert, the linebacker with a big-time safety background, in fact, played safety as recently as last year. So I could see him being a linebacker on the roster, but being a gunner in special teams. And then Velus Jones Jr., who took a lot of gunner reps during the preseason and during training camp. Saints tried a lot of guys there. Dallas Beanham was there. They had Kevin Austin Jr. and Cedric Wilson Jr. there. They tried a lot of different players. Dante Pettis took some gunner reps. Like, they tried out a lot of players at gunner all throughout all throughout training camp. This is why I track those things, because sometimes moves like this happen. And then you couple that with Rico Payton, the Rico Payton move as well. And so the Saints feel, and I asked Phil Galliano about this last week, Saints special teams coordinator, when they lost Rico Payton, what they feel like they have at those gunner spots. And he felt pretty confident about the guys that can go out there and help to cover kicks. But the two highlights for me are Isaiah Stallbird as well as Velus Jones Jr. Isaiah Stallbird recovered that fumble during the Chargers game that was muffed. Velus Jones Jr. had some really good coverage moments. Isaiah Stallbird also had some really great coverage moments in terms of making some tackles in punt coverage, all that. So I would definitely see the Saints going that route. Now, what do they do with that spot on the 53-man roster? Because here's the interesting thing. The Saints had 2 open spots on their practice squad. They filled those and added Tommy Mellott to the practice squad. And then they cut JT Gray. And so now you have to get somebody from the practice squad to the active roster, unless you're just waiving somebody from the practice squad and you're trying to sign somebody to the active roster. I wondered if maybe Brendan Rice, who they had in for a visit, would maybe take one of those spots, but it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. And so for me, what makes the most sense is safety Terrell Burgess. He's got a lot of experience with Brandon Staley. He plays safety, so he would immediately fit into that room, and he would give you somebody that you can trust on special teams while also being able to trust them on the defensive side of the football, and played a big set of special teams roles with the Los Angeles Rams and with the Washington Commanders. So that's my expectation. We will see if that ends up being the case. But if there was one player, and we'll probably already know whether or not I'm right or wrong by the time that this episode comes out. But in any case, he's a guy that makes a lot of sense if he's healthy and ready to go to start the season. So that's my expectation. But the JT Gray release, a very, very surprising one here to kick off week 1 in what has been a very, very eventful week. I mentioned that the Saints added 3 players to their practice squad. We talked about Tommy Mellott, but 2 defenders on the defensive line could bring some major help and depth to the positions as well. Let's get to that next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The NFL season is days away, and FanDuel is making sure that you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 as your first bet, and if that bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. What a deal that is going into this weekend's action. The Saints right now, 5.5-point underdogs at home up against the Arizona Cardinals. Maybe you don't like them to win, but maybe you like them to cover. Maybe you like the over on 187.5 passing yards for Spencer Rattler. Maybe you like the over for Juwan Johnson at 24.5 receiving yards. There's a ton to get in on over at FanDuel, and that's just around the Saints. Much more with college football and everything else going on around the world of sports. So go and check them out today. If you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Upside. What are you doing? Still paying full price for gas at the pump? Start saving money now and get real cash when you download the free Upside app. All you got to do is download the Upside app from your App Store or Google Play, and then start saving money at the pump today. Use our limited time promo code TOUCHDOWN to get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You could easily make up to $300 a year just by buying the gas that you're already buying, going and taking the commute that you're already taking. And you can easily see all this stuff cash out anytime, whether it's through your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card like Amazon and other brands. As well as you fill up, you earn rewards. So don't let this offer drive by. Download the free Upside app today and use that promo code TOUCHDOWN for a limited 25 cents per gallon bonus. That's promo code TOUCHDOWN. Offers vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints clearly felt that they needed some more depth on their defensive line, and they went and got it, at least for their practice squad, which I think was a really, really smart move by New Orleans. As I looked over their, at the time, 15-man practice squad, there were a couple of positions that were still missing. Running backs, still a glaring one. They have no running backs on their practice squad right now, but they do have 4 running backs on their active roster, so maybe they just feel okay with what that number is. The other position group that really stood out to me that the Saints didn't have any representation for was the big-bodied defensive tackle. They have Devon Godshaw, of course, on the active roster as their starting nose tackle. Christian Boyd, the exciting second-year defensive tackle that's playing sort of that backup nose behind him. But then you've got guys like Nathan Shepard and Brian Brzee and these sort of more but sort of more of these 3-4 defensive end types. And on the practice squad, they had Jonah Williams, another one of those 3-4 defensive end types. And so the Saints went out and signed to their practice squad big-bodied defensive tackle, Coziah Izzard. This is a 6'3", 305-pound athletic machine. This dude ran a 4.85 40 at just under 300 pounds during his pre-draft process. Also added a 33.5-inch vertical leap and a 9.5 broad jump, showing a lot of that explosion that he has as well. So you talk about a guy that's really, really athletic, but is a quintessential big body defensive tackle run stopper. He came in undrafted this season with the Kansas City Chiefs, played some snaps during the preseason, a little bit more of an even front situation there to where he was, playing a little bit more, maybe 3 tech and all that. But I think he could be a backup or an additional, let's call him a reserve, right? Since he's on the practice squad, nose tackle that can also maybe move around a little bit for you as well. He's got a little bit of defensive end experience in his ledger as well, in terms of what he did during his collegiate days. Notched 78 combined tackles, including 17.5 of them for a loss, 9 sacks, as well as a pair of forced fumbles during his time over at Penn State. So in his collegiate career, he was disruptive, but specifically disruptive when it came to the run game. So he has all that athleticism, is able to penetrate, get into the backfield, make some plays. You heard that 17.5 tackles for a loss. That's really good for a defensive tackle in particular. And he's a big reason why Penn State was able to stand up to some of those really, really good rushing attacks during the college football playoff, in particular this past year. So I think this is a smart addition by the New Orleans Saints. Kellen Moore actually announced this signing on Monday during his press conference. He announced the release of JT Gray and then the signing of Coziah Izzard. And then in a press release later, we found that he was going to the practice squad, not necessarily to the active roster. So the Saints adding that big body defensive tackle mold that they didn't have in their practice squad, they now have when it comes to this addition. He wasn't the only addition, however. The Saints also added pass rusher Iku Leota. This is a guy that I like a lot. So spent some time both at Northwestern and then most recently at Auburn, where he had his career high in sacks, just a couple, like his second to last year, his first year in Auburn, which was 7. He ends up with 15.5 total career sacks over the time of his collegiate playing time. 6'4", 250 pounds. The New Orleans Saints have officially changed their pass rusher prototype. Let's stop for a moment and applaud. Shall we? Yes. Because I think this is wise, right? This is what the Saints have shifted to under Brandon Staley. A very, very smart defensive approach. I was talking to a couple different players in the locker room who talk about how every single thing that Brandon Staley wants to do, he has an answer for. He has a why. He has a reason. It's all behind it. Just a really intelligent approach to the game. And one of the best things that the Saints did in hiring him is allowed themselves to shift their defensive end mold to a more modern mold and shift their defensive end usage to a more modern usage. No more 4-eye lining up inside the tackle. It's wide 9 all day. This is going to help them up against run games, especially outside zone run games. This is going to help them ideally against mobile quarterbacks as well, because you're not being boxed out before you even get a chance. You got to fight for outside positioning when you're lined up at that 4-eye. When you're in the 9 or the wide 9, you have that space. You can own the edge. We'll see how the Saints are able to do that in terms of execution, but the game plan makes sense. The logic is there. And in Leota now, the latest example of the Saints evolving their fit, look, prototype, archetype, what they like at that edge rusher spot. And I think that Leota paired with Fadil Diggs are 2 solid, good speed rushers to have on the practice squad. The Saints have their pass rushers, their edge rushers on the active roster: Chase Young, Carl Granderson, Cam Jordan, as well as Chris Rumph. This disrupts their C letter name trend that they had going on, but you add him to your practice squad in Leota. The Saints also got a bit of a up close and personal look at last year, right? He was with the Carolina Panthers week 1 last season. He had a sack against the Saints, as well as 3 tackles for a loss and a QB hit. So they saw him. clearly liked what he was able to do. Brandon Staley clearly likes what this guy's able to do. And so he lands on the practice squad to back up those guys in case there's an injury or you need another player to kind of step in or maybe even just be elevated for a game, whatever it might be. This is a guy that can go out there and help you along with Fadil Diggs. And then it also adds, we thought maybe Fadil Diggs and Jashean Davis might end up on the practice squad. Jashean Davis has not been brought back, but a guy like Leota who fits that 250 speed rusher mold, I think is a really, really good additional player to add to this conversation as well. The Saints had a very, very busy Monday with the release of JT Gray and the signing of these 3 practice squad players. We'll see who the player is that elevates up into JT Gray's spot, but it didn't stop there. Saints also had several players come in for tryouts that had some intriguing, and they have some intriguing options. Jamin Davis, the linebacker out of Kentucky, who they've been connected to before. He was a first-round pick for the Washington Commanders. That was a good tryout to bring in. Wide receivers like Jaquan Jackson as well as Brendan Rice were good guys to get a look at too. Jaquan Jackson, of course, of Tulane fame here in the great city of New Orleans. And then, of course, Brendan Rice, the son of Jerry Rice, an intriguing player to keep an eye out on should the Saints ever need to go back to the market, and he's still available. And then for you everydayers that were here during the NFL draft process, Ja Joyner, a guy that I liked a lot coming out of Minnesota as a pass rusher. Clearly the Saints liked what they saw in Leota a little bit better. That's why they signed him. But some intriguing names here in case the Saints have some needs later on down the road. All right, coming up in tomorrow's episode, make sure you come through. We'll start to dive into the game plan. Don't forget to check us out over at the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network at 10 a.m. every day as well. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, N-O-L-A. Hit me up. Let me know what the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.